Welcome to a new episode of Investology. We're going to explore what's happening to a very large asset pool. We're talking about many trillions, the world of RIAs, and the significant trend that governs the wealth industry, the consolidation of those RIAs into larger platforms, also called roll-ups. And I'm lucky to be able to talk about this with an expert in RIA succession planning, Andrew Mirolli. Hello, Andrew. How are you?
Excellent, George. I'm great. Thanks for having me today.
It's great to have you here. And as often, I like to start by setting up the scene, understanding the very basics. And you're based in the US, I'm based in the UK. I understand what RIAs are, registered investment advisor. But can you just explain a little bit, what are the typical RIAs? What do those firms look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really comes down, George, to who is the steward or shepherd of working families' assets, whether it's high net worth or ultra high net worth or mass affluent. Many times in the US, we have these called financial advisors. In Europe, it's more of a banker. But in the US market, it's usually individuals that are trained in asset management or risk, estate planning, tax sometimes, and they are the shepherd or steward of client assets. So a high net worth individual or mass affluent that has a job, owns a company, whatever, will trust and give this financial advisor his money to invest on his behalf, right? And that is the business model. So there's a few different types. Some financial advisors say I'm strictly fee-based. So I do no commissionable products. I charge a flat 1% or 90 basis points on all of the assets that I manage. There's another group, and that's kind of typically a registered investment advisors, a catch-all. The other would be a broker-dealer that has more commissionable-based products. Both are stewards, both act in the best interest of their clients. But that is the sector that we're in. And the why behind this, George, is time keeps on ticking. And the majority of these financial advisors are 60, 62, 68. Like they're getting to the point where they need a succession plan. And you're seeing this across, every industry. I don't know how it is in the UK, but it's harder and harder to find plumbers and electricians or CPAs. And I've been struggling to find a CPA as we get into year end. And a lot of them are retiring. And the same is true with financial advisors. The difference between a plumber and a financial advisor is he's not using his body every day. He's using his mind. And so a lot of these advisors think that they have longer than they do. And so it's not uncommon to find an advisor that's 73 years old and still managing clients' assets. So we are helping those advisors craft and shape a succession plan that fits with their goals.
So there's already a lot of elements and potentially sideways conversations, such as the fees, the age, the nature of those individuals. I would also say that there's another element that, in terms of succession, is that my plumber is not, how do you say, the shepherd of my plumbing, right?
Right.
When she retires, well, we'll have to move on to
Fine.
another plan. Whereas I guess there's something a bit different here with the assets of the family assets. And also, could we just try to paint a bigger picture, in terms of big numbers, how many people they are? And you said you described them mainly as individual. Is that the case? Is it typically a small team or
You
a
know,
team?
George, the numbers is, round ballpark with a standard deviation of error. It's one in every two financial advisors is retiring in the next 10 years. I've seen numbers of $10 trillion in assets up to 100 trillion. I think 100 trillion is a little large
Hmm.
but that's probably global, right? But in the US, it's one out of every two advisors or nearly $10 trillion of assets that are managed it will be changing hands of who is the steward over the next 10 years.
Right. And if I look at, the service you provide, you said the shepherd, the wealth, etc. So what does it mean? And also, how is it? I guess it's kind of regulated by the name, because there's this designated name, RIAs, broker dealer. They can do different things. But typically, can you guide us through, from really a beginner's mindset,
Yeah,
I don't know, I want help with my assets. I, well, what's the process?
there's an oversight committee or there's a registration required for this, right? Especially in the US. And you can be an independent registered investment advisor. There are licenses and tests that you take, just like being a general contractor, if we stick with the plumbing analogy. So an individual can go out, they go to school, they get a background in finance. That's great. In order to be an RIA or a broker dealer and advisor, you pass a certain number of tests, right? And these tests allow you to do different things for clients legally. But a client will say that the customer, the individual, the client level, the household is pick your poison. They own a company, they're an executive, they're a blue collar worker, right? They have assets. Maybe they need life insurance, maybe they need help with taxes, maybe they just have saved, 500K or $1 million and they're 45 years old and they say, "What do I do with this? I want to retire one day. Let's find someone to help." Now, it's interesting in today's world, you see Robinhood, you have ChatGPT and AI that a lot of, I wouldn't say smaller accounts, but on the grand scheme of things, smaller accounts, 50,000, 100, couple $100,000 of investable assets are saying, I don't really need somebody, right? I'll use AI, I'll use Robinhood, there's no commissions. I'll just invest it in the S&P 500 or Google, Tesla, Apple, what have you. And that's true, right? That's some of the change that's happening in the industry is 25, 30 years ago, it was much harder to buy or sell a stock. You had,
Hmm.
the tickers and the pits that are you really just see in movies nowadays. With the accessibility of financial instruments these days, you don't technically need someone to invest your capital. Now, are you going to do a great job? That's up to you, right? Like the majority of people are very good at selling high and buying, or selling high and buy. Like they don't do a great
Yeah,
job.
there's a great chart about Robinhood investors, which has really struck me. It's this year, right, when the S&P is up by, I don't know, probably 20%. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly, but they're not making money as an aggregate. Which, if they don't make money this year, it's a big deal. But anyway, let's continue. Yes, I see your point.
There's a lot of emotional stuff that goes
Mm.
into managing your own money, and you get panic. And so a lot of folks will opt for, I want I want a guy or I want a girl to manage my assets. This is what they do with their life. And so they'll invest their money or give their money to this steward. And the steward will say, okay, well, what are your financial goals? What's your revenue or what's your income? What's the risk that you are comfortable taking? And then they will invest the money on behalf of the client in those terms or to accomplish those goals. So from a broad strokes, it's individual earners entrusting their financial future to an advisor. The advisor invests those clients' assets and stewards them really for their whole.
Right. That is a typically comprehensive offering, right? I can advise you on, you mentioned life insurance, but it's also like, oh, what do I buy the S&P or where do I put my
Yeah,
money specifically? Perhaps we had an episode where we discussed about estate planning and stuff like that. So there's a whole spectrum of services. And now, if we go a little bit closer to this succession planning of what's a generic term? RIAs is a generic term, or wealth
yeah,
advisors.
yeah. One.
So you mentioned they grow older, and although it seems something that you can do later in your life, at some point, well, you've got to move on. But you also mentioned, well, there's two things. First of all, I see that you approach it, I had a look on your website, as it's not, there's more to it than just finding a buyer, just see you later, right? So
Yeah,
maybe we can talk a bit about that, the other type of motivation, the other consideration beyond, obviously, is this the right price for my business and stuff like that. So what
yeah,
goes through their mind when someone is considering to exit or maybe just partially exit and stuff
yeah.
from the,
It's a cheap answer, but the answer is it depends, right? And it depends on the individual because
sure.
sometimes we work with advisors that are totally burnt out and they are ready to be done. We worked with an advisor earlier this year. He said, I want to be sold. I want the money to come to my house. I want to be totally done by the end of the year. Great. Other folks say, look, this is my identity. I've done this for 40 years. I'm 68, 71 years old. I need a succession plan because if I get hit by a bus, that is not respecting the trust that clients have placed in me for the last 40 years. So, what is the backup plan? And I've had some clients asking me, hey, George, how long are you going to keep working? That kind of weighs on them. But their identity is wrapped up in this. Not in a bad way. It's who they are. It's the value they bring to the world. And so it's often we see a 2 to 3 year transition plan. You still got a lot of gas in the tank. Spend that gas to now proper diligence the buyer. Who's the right fit for your clients? If you think about a baton pass, who do I want to pass the baton to? And then structure where you stay involved for 2 to 3 years. You get paid out on the fair value of your firm over 2 to 3 years. At which point the clients are comfortable with the new face. You're comfortable that they're in good hands, and you can take the 2-3 week vacation that you honestly can't because you're tied to the markets and not your phone and things like that. So it really does depend on what are the goals, what's the family makeup, what's their financial situation. Sometimes it's, hey, the sale of this business is complete gravy on top of my net worth. Other times it is solving a wealth gap. My partner and I are certified exit planning advisors. We talk about where's your current net worth, where's your wealth goal, that the wealth goal at a 5% fixed rate of return can generate enough income for you to live off of, right? So if that's $10 million and you're at $7 million, is the sale of this business filling that wealth gap, right? So it really does depend. And that's why we buy AUM, we take it a very slow approach. We call it the X-ray process internally, but it's the complete opposite of, George, tell me your numbers. What's your revenue? Let me get this in the market and blast it to 10,000 people. Because that doesn't help you. One, you as the seller, you're not really sure what you want. You've thought about this a little bit, but I'm not really positive. And then you get 25 or 50 letters of intent that want to buy your business for the revenue. That's a whole job in and of itself of finding these people. Are they trustworthy? All of that stuff. So we take it very slow, and we have like a 3-step process where first we create a true value report. What is the value of George's firm today? The makeup of it. The second is all about the legacy matchmaker, that baton. Who do you want to pass the baton to? And then our third conversation is all about structuring the deal. Do you want to get paid out, start to finish in 12 months? Are you open to a 2 or 3 year payout? Do you understand if you get a lump sum, it's going to be a lower amount because the risk is on the acquirer? Right. And so at the end of that process, it's completely free to our sellers, right? We're fully compensated on the buy side. And we ask our sunsetters, as we call them, George, would you trust us enough to make an introduction? And we make 2, but no more than 3 introductions per seller, because we know what they're looking for. And if I bring you a bunch of people that you've said, this doesn't fit my parameters, it's a waste of time. And so buy AUM's like core thesis is, how do we make succession planning, much, much better and save everyone a ton of time? So the buyers can say, hey, look, these are the firms that I'm looking to acquire, these parameters. A seller says, I'd be open to selling to this type of buyer. And then we make those matches. So, we kind of, if I was in an elevator and someone said, what do you do? I'd say I'm a financial matchmaker.
Got it. What's interesting from this perspective is it's a little bit different from what we have in mind when we hear about equity roll-ups, right? The image itself, we're kind of...
It is.
I don't know if the image is a roller coaster or wave or something like that kind of swipes through the industry and brings something new. Whereas what you're depicting here is something, complicated, subtle, and that takes a lot of time, right? So I guess, the big question is like, so why is this equity roll-up such a big thing if it's so hard, or maybe when you do it is different, or why do we talk about it so much? Because sometimes the industry, the papers talk about something and the reality is together
Yeah.
different.
No, I think of it, you're totally right. I think of it kind of like a vacuum cleaner, and it's just I'm sucking up, and that in some senses is true, right? Why? My background's in private equity. I've helped with roll-ups in manufacturing businesses and oil and gas and all of that. All of those industries, HVAC or roofing is big in the US, like home services companies. The whole purpose of all of those roll-ups is to buy revenue. Private equity has a ton of capital. What do we do with it? Let's go buy operating businesses that generate capital. 5 to 10 years ago, someone in a boardroom somewhere at a private equity company had the light bulb of, oh my goodness, the financial service industry is easy recurring revenue. They're very sticky clients, and there's a bunch of folks that are going to retire in the next 15, 20 years. So if we're going to go buy an HVAC company or a roofing or a manufacturing business, why not go buy an advisory business? Because it's recurring revenues and they're super sticky. So the why behind it is simply from a numbers penciling a deal. I can buy it for 2 times or 5 times revenue, and I have an asset that naturally appreciates with market value. So all of the tailwinds are there for PE to say, what a great asset class. Years later, what's happened is now it's kind of like the housing market, right? If a bunch of buyers come in, well, then the average price raises. And so you're seeing with the interest of private equity, the average sale price of a financial advisor's book is much higher. We worked with a seller this year who said, I didn't think I'd ever be able to sell this for any money. It was just a lifestyle practice. And over the last 10 years, apparently people have want my business. And so now there's, you talk about bid and ask spread, there's a very strong bid on these businesses. And so, yes, in the macro view, are there buyers that say, I have capital, I want to buy these businesses or clients or recurring revenue is really what it comes down to. Absolutely. Are all acquisitions private equity backed? No, absolutely not. We're working with some buyers that are 500 million in a partner group out of San Francisco. They want to buy some firms. Another guy is 43 years old, 180 million in a. He's got a great business, and he goes, "What's next?" And so the motivation is usually similar. I can buy recurring revenue and I can increase my business. The who is very different.
Right, right. So different profile, not just private equity, but also other areas of stuff like that. And how does it look? So if we look a bit on this buyer side, so yes, you buy AUM and it's recurring revenue, and we kind of imagine the if you can have leverage and recurring revenue, it's a good combo. But how does it work as well in terms of transformation? Because, well, the first aspect is the head, the person in charge will no longer be there. And secondly, I assume there's some kind of efficiency of scale, technological things, etc. So can you tell us a bit about the after?
Yeah, so if we go back to why are people buying this and the revenue that's going up, some firms are backed by private equity and do have a thesis or a motivation to sell their business in another 5 years or something, right? Also interesting about this asset class and industry is that the revenue multiple is not a flat line. It is very much a hockey stick. So the larger your revenue the higher multiple you can attribute to selling that. So one of our buyers is multiple billions, and let's say round numbers, a $10 billion firm. So that firm is generating a lot more revenue than a $100 million seller. Consequently, the multiple that you apply to a $10 billion firm might be 16 or 18 times EBITDA, whereas the EBITDA multiple on a $100 million firm might be 4.5 to 5.5 times. So if I'm a big firm and I think, well, I'm going to sell, currently my firm's worth, let's round numbers, let's say I'm worth 20 times EBITDA or 18 times EBITDA, and I'm going to sell my firm in a couple years. Well, I'm more than willing to overpay a little bit Because if I buy $100 million, even at 6 times EBITDA, and I add it to me, I could flip it tomorrow at 18 times or 20 times EBITDA. And so that's where you begin to see this over time, you know, your purchase price is going up and up because they don't really care, right? So that's how the numbers work. How does the transition work? If you and I, George, were buying a business, we would want the CEO, assuming that he wasn't terrible at his job and running the business into the ground, right? We bought a business for the revenue. We'd say, I want the CEO to stay in place for another year, 2 years, what have you. If the CEO says, I'm selling today and I'm gone tomorrow, I'm going to say, George, we should discount this business significantly because they're going to lose some revenue or some customer accounts and all of that stuff. So buyers are inclined, motivated to keep the seller engaged, which is why the most often deal that we see get done is something around, I pay you 50% of the value at closing, I pay you another 25% after year one, and another 25% after year two, and we true it up or down based on lost revenue. You lose your biggest account, well, the purchase price diminishes by, you bring on another 5 or 10 million in assets before the end of the 2 years, I pay you out for that. So that's like it's a longer runway where clients get used to, okay, well, I've been used to talking to George, but now Andrew's my guy and he's really performed for me. So, well, George, good luck in retirement. Call me if you ever have a fishing trip. It's seamless. And so the sell today and gone tomorrow is much higher risk on both parties. The buyer says, I thought I was buying 1 million in revenue, and then 20% of the clients leave. That stinks. And the seller says, well, I thought I was getting, let's say, 3 times revenue. I thought I was getting $3 million for my business, but then 20% of my clients left, so my exit value has diminished by that. So both parties are inclined to say, let's make sure that the clients are sticky. Exactly.
But one other question that, based on what you discussed, that the multiples increase as the amount, as the let's say AUM increase, which is magic, right? But I think the underlying assumption, or my guess on that, is that it works because somehow there's efficiency. And indeed, if I manage 1 million, I can manage 10, and with the same resources, right? But if I aggregate people and I keep the same amount of people, and there's no, if I was, in my mind, just a theoretical example, I keep them as individual firms, I just consolidate, then there's no real efficiency. So is there a layer of technological or other types of efficiencies or integration when I start rolling up those companies?
I mean, short, direct answer is absolutely. Right. If I'm using one technology or.
But it's not that important. You don't seem like that's the big play.
That's not the big play, right? It makes the numbers pencil, because if my cost stayed the same for every new body I put on, the profit margins would be lower and it'd be less attractive. But yes, I think, and that's one of the determining factors of any roll up. If I'm buying HVAC or roofing companies, I'm going to use the same Salesforce software or same cold caller center to book new roofing appointments. I think by the nature of someone rolling up smaller businesses, there will always be efficiency in operations and technology.
And a few questions now, again, on the buyer. If we look at the private equity firms specifically, well, who are those guys? And are they the same private equity, like the giants that I've heard about, Apollo, Blackstone, or are they smaller, integrated, dedicated to that space? You're going to tell me it depends, but can you tell me a little bit more?
I think it's everybody, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're willing to go spend, let's say I create a fund, a PE fund, and I say I want to roll up HVAC companies, and here's $200 million, go buy it. As an asset class, financial advising is a much safer, much stickier, has natural growth. Like if I'm buying a business today and it's got 100 mil and it's generating $1 million in revenue, by the nature of this stock market, in 10 years, it's going to be more valuable. That's not necessarily true with roofing or HVAC or things like that. So if I'm willing to be a PE firm and do roll ups in home services or this or that, I'm almost always going to be willing to invest in a safer asset class, right? Is absolutely every private equity firm doing it? I couldn't tell that. I'm sure they're not.
Mhm.
But it is the big mega ones and the mediums and smalls. Often what they will do is it's because PE is kind of a four-letter word when it comes to the sunsetters where I don't want to sell to a PE firm, you know. If I put that seller on a date with three buyers and one or two of them was backed by private equity, they probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, right, right.
Why? Because a PE firm says, I don't know how to be an advisor. I don't have a massive team. I don't have, so I'm going to find a growing advisory practice with
Right.
a great CEO. I'm going to take a 20% or a 30% stake in the business, and here's a blank check. Go grow. And so that firm that just feels like any other big advisory firm says, great, I'm backed by private equity. I've got firepower. Let's go make acquisitions and grow our firm. So it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, like the private equity is behind the curtain so that it doesn't look or feel like this big business investment banking. You know, they're advisors just like, you know, everybody else. The difference is they've done a minority stake with a PE firm. They've got a blank check to grow, and they'll probably flip another 25% to the big firm in 5 or 10 years at that much higher EBITDA multiple. So they're willing to overpay on the acquisition side, which is pushing all of the valuations higher.
Sure, sure. Yes, indeed. We think like private equity and people that maybe are expert in their private equity field, but it's private equity vehicles or firm backed by private equity, which
Right.
indeed doesn't necessarily materialize. So that's the way, that's a better way to see it. Another thing regarding this, because there's still a private equities such as Blackstone that are still in. One of my thoughts and perhaps concern is that that's only relevant if we take, you know, a large firm that has multiple products, is that, and concern, I mean, let's say my immediate thought would be, oh, this firm will also be pushing its own products throughout
Mm.
its RIA network. Is that also kind of part of the game?
Not always. Not always. Sometimes less than you would think. We'll
Mm.
put it that way, right? Because is it an additional, and it's less from the PE firm, it's more on the buyer level, right? So let's say
Yeah.
private equity backs. So on the buyer level, they might say, hey, we've got this proprietary model and we charge, you know, another 20 bips or something like that. It's another revenue stream. What you have to take into consideration, though, is the risk associated. It's a super regulated industry. It's super regulated. And so if I'm pushing everybody into, I'm already charging 1% to manage their assets. And then I'm going, oh my gosh, this is the best investment vehicle for you. It happens to be something I create, manage, and charge on. Now I'm double dipping on fees.
Yes, yes.
So sometimes that happens, but it's not the motivation, right?
Sure.
The motivation is just grow the pot, grow the recurring revenue, and then sometimes sell it. Some buyers that we work with are $5 or $6 billion. They're never going to be owned by private equity. They're family owned. They do an ESOP or something. They're totally against that. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to I have free cash flow. Let's go out and buy businesses that look like mine. It's a good use because the tailwinds of market growth, I'm going to make money if I hold it long enough.
Sure. The next question then regarding this trend, because it's let's call it an easy win, right? Because of this aggregation of assets, this appreciation of multiples. So you can see where it's going. And I can see why there's this trend, but the question is, where does it end?
Yeah.
For how long? Or is there dynamics that means it's self-sustainable because there's also, you know, maybe things shooting up?
It's a good question. And I haven't been asked that before. Where does it end? I mean, it probably ends with a few super large players. From a customer standpoint, you're going to, and we're already seeing this as a fee compression. Whereas, you know, 20 years ago, you could probably get away with charging 2% asset management fee, almost like a PE model. If you're doing like a fund of funds or something, it's a 2 and 20. That has gone away. And then for a long time, it was industry standards 100 bips, 1% on assets. You're seeing that get compressed. So now maybe average bips is like 95, 90 bips. So where does it end? I think the good news is I think it does end better for the individual client. A lot of the folks that we're working with, by the nature of being near retirement, are older. They they aren't using all of the high-end technology. They're not communicating super regularly with the clients. You roll these up and you increase efficiencies with technology. Now there's a lot more competition. You can compress fees. So I think at the end of the day, the customer will win. You're seeing it in the US in dentist office right now. There's a massive roll up in dentistry. I don't know if it's the same in UK. And so there's less and less mom and pop dentist office. Is that good or bad for the consumer? It doesn't really matter, right? The high end ones might be a little bit more expensive. You might not be able to pay in cash if you want to. They all take insurance. Like, I don't think it will change that much. At the end of the day, the individual, what I see happening, George, is that 5, 10 years from now, you have this delineation of if I have less than 250, maybe 500K of investable assets, I'm going to go, I can do this myself. I'm going to use ChatGPT and Robinhood and AI, and I'm going to buy and hold. I'm going to read Warren Buffett. I'm going to buy great companies and hold them forever. Great, that would work, right? As long as you don't get emotional and sell and panic and all of these things. The other side is the high net worth, the guy that was making 500K a year and then sells his business and gets $5 million. I do believe that there will always be the desire for the hand white glove service that an individual needs to be there. Not a robo advisor, not a chat GPT thread. I need an individual that is skilled, educated, and experienced in this to manage my money. So you will probably have that delineation. There'll be a larger group of mass affluent investable assets that people say, I'm going to do this myself with AI and zero commission fee to invest in Robinhood or whatever.
Just to be clear, I think I just myself, I don't use or Robinhood. There is a regular broker, and it's one of the tools you can use. It's okay.
Right.
It's okay. I won't hold you to particular things. Let's call him the DIY
Exactly.
investor. Yeah.
Exactly.
But this is not a profession that's going away. It's probably a natural evolution from mom and pop shops to something greater. And just like in other industries, it's evolving. You can see like things sprouting elsewhere. Maybe if everything is consolidated across many big players, niche players with something special, some kind of flavor can emerge. What I also get from what you say is that this roll up, which I think it has a lot to do with the name, it's a lot more subtle than rolling it up because it's a people's business, right? So, and that's what makes it different to a roll up in HVAC and the difference of people who deal with what you call the shepherd, a wealth that might have already covered many generations.
Absolutely. It's the 9 times out of 10. At the end of our journey with the seller, we do a simple T-chart. What are your must-haves and your nice-to-haves? What are the most important things to you? One of the questions I asked is, George, is total compensation or fit for your clients more important for you? 9 times out of 10, it is clients, clients, clients. I've been with these folks for 25 years. They are my legitimate family or have become friends and family. It's not about the money. Money needs to be there. I want it to be a fair value for my business. I want my clients taken care of because I play golf with these folks. I go fishing with them. That is the most, and so you're right. That's the biggest difference between a plumber or a roofer. It's like, I replace a roof one time. I don't even know your kid's name. And this is the complete opposite of that. So that's the most important thing. And that's why we take it slow, because if it just is about the numbers, it forgets all of the personal and human touch that these advisors have done what they've done for 30 years.
Right. Although the name of the company is quite strict to the point, but the process is all but that.
It really is, yeah. And that's BioM is the catchy name, right? And but people, what they experience with us is just honest transparency. George, we're a cold calling company. I met my partner. He cold called me years ago, and he hit me with the line that our team of callers still uses, where they call you and they say, George, I want to be honest with you. It's a cold call. Do you want to hang up or let me have 30 seconds? From the jump, it is about transparency and honesty. And so we really take that to the extreme with our sellers. It is anything but the farthest thing from, let me get your numbers, I'm going to create a listing and blast it to the world. It is financial matchmaking at its core.
Right, right. Maybe as a final question, there's something that sometimes I wonder as I age, although I'm not at retirement age yet, is, when did you retire and what does it mean? Like, is it an on and off button? And given your perspective, which is like the best solution is to have a transitional period, which is years, not months, right? How do you see that from the perspective of, aging RIA? Is that something that they could look into?
It's one of the main things that we discuss throughout the X-ray process is how long do you want to stay involved? And we like to call it, what is your third act? Everybody plans for financial future or business future. It's like, where's the personal planning? Working with a seller, a husband and wife, and we said, what are you going to do after you sell the business? And the wife piped in and said, oh, we're going to move to Colorado and build a house. I said, great. What are you going to do after you sell the business? I just told you, we're moving to Colorado. We got 5 acres. We're going to build a house. And I go, Stephen, how long have you been doing this? 30 years. And how many hours a week do you usually work? 60 hours a week. Okay, so what are you going to do after you sell the business? And it began to click. Like, moving to Colorado and building a house is not a plan. And so having a plan for post succession is super important, whether that is staying on the consultant or continuing to, we have one guy who teaches at the local college, like the university, the community college. He loves it, keeps him sharp. Other people have investment clubs. Most buyers are super open to some involvement on a long-term basis. Free referrals at the end of the day, or not free, but maybe I give you a referral credit, or we share the fee for a couple years. But I think it's an improper ask to tell someone that has been doing something and bringing value to families and the world for 40 years to say, well, today's the last day you matter. Good luck in retirement. And so it needs to be handled consciously on both sides, from the acquirer side, but also from the seller, to think about, what do I want to do? And it's not travel the world. I would push harder and say, where do you want to go? How long do you want to go there? What do you like? You got to create almost a business plan for the personal side of stuff in the third act. Otherwise, it's going to be a year post transition, and you're going, okay, look, the money's great. I'm not upset about that, but I got nothing going on. That's a very real thing that has to be considered for both parties.
And that's a very interesting question at societal level, right? As we age,
It is.
how do you sunset? How does it work? And there's many different ways, right? So, yeah, thank you so much, Andrew, for explaining all that. We got a much better understanding of that universe. Love chatting to you. There's a very catchy website, byam.com, but tell us as well where people can find you and find more resources, please.
Yeah, so our website is simply Buy AUM. For any financial advisor out there, we do a true, no strings attached, free valuation of your business. It's called the True Value Report. You put in 9 implements, and our finance department creates a TVR for you. I'm on LinkedIn, Andrew Mirolli, and happy to connect with you. I get hit up all the time of what's some advice for my business or different things like that. It's all about being of value and creating education, and so if we can be of help of any time, I'm happy to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks, George. Pleasure.